These are the leaders of Mercosur, a group of South American countries. After 20 years, they signed a trade deal with the European Union. Encompassing nearly 800 million people, the deal would remove 90% of tariffs between the two blocs. But even as it was being signed, the Amazon was on fire and farmers were in the streets. While the trade deal would bring economic benefits to both blocs, under the surface, it's more than that. It's an attempt by both the EU and Mercosur to liberalize and reform sectors of their economy. While it was signed in 2019, it has yet to be ratified, and some fear that it will fall victim to the protectionism and trade wars that have torpedoed trade deals in the past decade. Mercosur is short for Mercado Común del Sur, or Southern Common Market. It's a free trade deal area comprised of Argentina and Brazil, which make up 95% of the bloc's economic output, as well as Paraguay and Uruguay, most of the remaining countries of South America being associated members of Mercosur. Unlike the European Union, which has a certain level of political integration, Mercosur has focused mostly on regional trade integration. But in the past 2 decades, it has increasingly shifted to developing international partnerships. This new trade deal with the European Union would be its largest international agreement to date, but it has not escaped controversy, particularly due to changes it would bring to 2 key industries, agriculture and manufacturing. European manufacturing still represents 15% of its economy, despite deindustrialization in the past decades. Its automotive, chemical, and pharmaceutical manufacturing industries are continuously looking for new markets to expand, a sector where Mercosur has high tariffs protecting its own industry. When looking at agriculture, the tables are reversed. Mercosur countries are very competitive thanks to the South American climate, large-scale ranching and farming, and fewer labor and food regulations. Europe, on the other hand, has had a protectionist approach to agriculture with its common agricultural policy, a generous scheme of subsidies and regulation which aims to secure Europe's food security but costs nearly 40% of the EU's yearly spending. The yearly EU exports to Mercosur account for less than 0.5% of its total GDP, while Mercosur exports to the EU represent 2%. The opening up of the economies that it pushes for is also slow. It will take 15 years after ratification for the trade deal to fully enter into force, and some sensitive sectors will stay mostly off limits. This means that agricultural products like beef and poultry, but also commodities like sugar and honey and rice will still have quotas, limiting how much of them will actually enter the EU market. If we look at beef, which has proven to be one of the more controversial elements of the trade deal, it makes room for another 99,000 tons to be imported tariff-free to the EU. This increased quota only accounts for 1.2% of the EU's total beef consumption, which doesn't explain the opposition of the deal by European farmers. Yet looking under the surface tells a different story. This 1% of beef imports would be for the more expensive cuts of meats, which represents the largest share of income for beef farmers. On top of the existing quota for South American beef, it would bring the market share of Mercosur countries to 30% of all expensive cuts. One of the main reasons that the trade deal has been so controversial is that it is being used to reform protectionist sectors in both economies. In Europe, it is an attempt to reform the CAP, which is increasingly seen as an obsolete policy of the 20th century. By opening up European agriculture to outside influence, the EU hopes to reform the sector, to wean it off the subsidies it is used to. At stake is the freeing up of 40% of the EU budget, but also stimulating innovation and competition. The same counts for Mercosur. By opening up their markets to European manufacturing, they will slowly turn away from their long tradition of protectionism. So it raises a question: who would benefit the most from this deal? Spain and Portugal, despite having large agricultural sectors, have been some of the strongest advocates of the deal. They stand to win a lot, as they speak the same languages and would benefit from the liberalization of services included in the deal. It is also likely that these countries would serve as the European Union's gateway to South America. Germany would also be a significant winner on this trade deal, particularly its auto industry, which would see tariffs drop significantly over the course of 15 years. South American farmers, with increased access to the EU, would also benefit greatly from the deal. But the losers would be European farmers who will face competition from South American farmers, and the Mercosur manufacturers that will face additional competition from established European firms. France, Belgium, and Ireland, where the agricultural lobby is particularly strong, have opposed the deal, which threatens their farmers' livelihoods. But the deal's controversy has extended beyond the liberalization that it plans. In the European Union, it has been attacked for not respecting the criteria of the European Green Deal. These criticisms have been embodied by the current Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro. When the deal was first finalized, the Amazon was ablaze, and under his watch, environmental regulation in Brazil has weakened significantly, and farmers and ranchers have accelerated the deforestation of the forest. His environmental minister has stated that the Amazon was open for economic exploitation, threatening what has often been called the Earth's lung. The EU's member states have lost trust in Bolsonaro's willingness to meet Brazil's climate commitments. EU farmer groups are also quick to point out the use of dangerous pesticides, as well as genetically modified crops and hormones in Mercosur agricultural products, citing it as an unfair advantage the Mercosur farmers have, since these methods are forbidden in the EU by law. In their view, this deal is another nail in the coffin for Europe's agricultural sector. These ethical concerns extend to the indigenous tribes living in the Amazon, who fear the increased demand would mean even greater pressure from companies trespassing and using their territories for agriculture. Civil society and farmer unions are using these arguments as a reason to oppose the deal, unless guarantees can be made for the protection of the environment, particularly as it would contradict some elements of the European Green Deal, the EU's signature policy. But Bolsonaro's presidency is temporary, with his popularity in freefall over his management of the pandemic. It is likely that some, if not most of his changes to Brazil's environmental policy will be reversed. While the opposition is currently focused around the environmental credentials of Brazil, when Bolsonaro leaves office, it is likely that the initial opposition on protectionist grounds will re-emerge. The signing of trade deals are necessary for the EU to guarantee its global influence and to continue having the regulatory clout it currently enjoys. In the past, the European Union has enjoyed access to trade deals and pushed its trade partners to match its strict regulation and values. But it is something it has increasingly struggled to do, with the China Investment Partnership all but stalled over the treatment of the Uyghurs and forced labor camps in Xinjiang. It also highlights the difficulty that the EU can have in making economic concessions, especially when the benefits and drawbacks affect different countries. France, which is the largest recipient of common agricultural policy funds, and has the most to lose, is likely to continue opposing the deal, using environmental or protectionist arguments. It shows the difficulty in balancing the interests of 27 countries. And the trade deal raises a question about the role the European Union wants to play in a globalized world. Does it want to be one of its protagonists, or focus instead on its domestic market? Trade deals all across the world have been swept away due to the rising tide of protectionism, and it is still possible that the EU-Mercosur trade deal will soon join them. This was Intereurope. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for the latest updates and analysis on European news.